Welcome, dear listener, to a quiet corner of time, where the whispers of history drift like soft mists across the landscape of our imagination. Tonight we invite you to settle into a space of deep calm and gentle repose, as we embark on a journey through the life of a man whose spirit continues to echo through the ages. This is not a tale of hurried events, but a tranquil recounting designed to soothe your mind and guide you toward the gentle embrace of sleep. Allow the cares of your day to recede as we turn our attention to the story of Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, a narrative woven with threads of quiet courage, profound resilience, and ultimately a somber beauty that illuminates the enduring human spirit. His leadership, a beacon through the stormiest seas, ultimately steered a fractured nation toward the shores of unity, bringing an end to the American Civil War. Yet, his remarkable journey was brought to an abrupt and heartbreaking close, in a moment that sent ripples of shock and sorrow across the entire world. A moment that forever etched his name into the annals of both triumph and tragedy. We will trace the path of this extraordinary man, from the simple, earthy foundations of his birth, watching as he quietly rises to become a towering symbol of freedom and unity. Our journey will gently unfold, revealing the intricate tapestry of events that led to that fateful night at Ford's Theater, introducing us to the quiet strength of the people who stood faithfully beside him, and shedding a soft light upon the shadows of the conspirators who harbored the dark intent that ultimately claimed his life. From the early, almost forgotten plans of kidnapping, to the final, desperate chase and capture of John Wilkes Booth, each segment of this story will invite you to reflect on how one man's deep-seated hatred tragically collided with another's unwavering vision for peace, a vision that continues to inspire. So breathe softly, relax deeply, and stay with us as we follow the quiet, contemplative journey of a leader whose profound words continue to resonate, like a gentle hum, through the corridors of time. This is the story of his humble rise, his arduous struggles, and the final, poignant hours that forever altered the destiny of America. Let us now journey back to a time long past, to the hush of February in the year 1809. In the verdant, rolling landscapes of Hardin County, Kentucky, history itself seemed to hold its breath, poised on the precipice of a moment that would resonate through generations, forever etched in the collective memory of a burgeoning nation. It was on the 12th day of February in that quiet year, amidst the stillness of a winter morning, that Abraham Lincoln first drew breath. His birthplace was a small, unassuming one-room log cabin, nestled on what was known as the Sinking Spring Farm, a tranquil plot of land, not far from the small settlement of Hodgenville, within the then-young United States. Imagine, if you will, the rustic simplicity of that dwelling, constructed from rough-hewn timber, its walls a testament to the hard work and enduring spirit of frontier life. This humble cabin, modest in every aspect, was the unlikely cradle for a boy who would one day inherit the weight of a deeply divided nation, a nation teetering on the brink of its own dissolution. What then were the formative influences, the silent forces that shaped this unassuming child? How did a boy born into circumstances of profound poverty and lacking the advantages many take for granted, gradually ascend to become the articulate voice of freedom, the steadfast emblem of unity for his country? And what enduring lessons, gleaned from the quiet rhythms of his early life, fortified his spirit and sustained him through the tumultuous storms of civil war and unimaginable personal loss? Abraham's father, Thomas Lincoln, was a man of the earth, a hard-working frontiersman, whose days were spent in the demanding labor of cultivating the land, coaxing sustenance from the soil, and with his own hands, crafting sturdy furniture from the timber around him. He embodied the practical resilience required to survive, and indeed, to thrive, on the untamed frontier. His mother, Nancy Hanks Lincoln, was remembered as a woman of gentle disposition and profound compassion, her character marked by an innate kindness and an unwavering moral fortitude. Her quiet strength was a foundational pillar of their small family. Together, Thomas and Nancy undertook the demanding task of raising their children, instilling in them the timeless virtues of discipline, an abiding faith, and an unshakable honesty, all within the rugged, often unforgiving landscape of the Kentucky frontier. Life in those early years was undeniably difficult, a constant dance with scarcity and hardship. The family frequently grappled with the biting chill of harsh winters, the relentless specter of illness that stalked the isolated communities, and the perpetual, arduous challenge of simply making ends meet. Every day brought its own set of trials, its own demands for fortitude and perseverance, yet through it all, a quiet spark began to glow within young Abraham. Despite the sparsity of formal educational opportunities, he received only a few months of sporadic schooling throughout his childhood. Abraham exhibited an extraordinary and insatiable thirst for learning. He taught himself, with an almost incredible determination, to both read and write, often employing resourceful methods born of necessity. Imagine him, in the dim light of their cabin, painstakingly forming letters with a piece of charcoal on smooth, planed wooden boards, the warmth of the fireplace casting flickering shadows as he worked. These simple tools became his early classroom, the worn pages of the family Bible, the timeless wisdom embedded in Aesop's fables, and the inspiring narratives of classic heroes became his most trusted teachers. Through these stories, his nascent sense of justice was sharpened, and his innate compassion for others deepened, quietly shaping the moral core that would define his later leadership. In those foundational early years, the seemingly small, unassuming seeds of future greatness were gently taking root within the quiet mind of a boy who, against all odds, would one day stand poised to alter the very fate of a nation. The Kentucky winds whispered secrets of a future he could not yet comprehend, but his spirit was already listening. The rugged frontier of Kentucky, with its log cabins and endless forest, gradually gave way to new beginnings for Abraham and his family as they sought fresh opportunities in the burgeoning lands of Indiana. In the year 1816, a significant turning point in young Abraham's life occurred when the Lincoln family, with all their earthly possessions, embarked on a momentous journey, crossing the broad expanse of the Ohio River. Their destination was the dense, untamed forests, situated near a small, winding waterway known as Little Pigeon Creek. This relocation was more than just a change of scenery. It marked a profound shift in Abraham's development, guiding him from the boundless curiosity of boyhood towards a deepening sense of determination and a growing awareness of the arduous realities of existence. Life in Indiana, mirroring their earlier struggles, was far from easy. The family's new cabin, a testament to their enduring resolve, was constructed from rough, unrefined timber, its sturdy walls a shield against the elements. Survival in this wild landscape demanded an unceasing cycle of arduous labor. Each day brought forth its own set of physical challenges, the relentless rhythm of chopping wood to fuel the hearth and construct their home, the patient toil of planting corn in the newly cleared fields, hoping for a bountiful harvest, and the constant, attentive care of their animals, crucial for their sustenance. Yet, amidst these ceaseless struggles, amidst the sweat and the strain, Abraham's profound love for learning, far from diminishing, only deepened, growing with an almost organic strength. With no formal schoolhouse within reasonable reach, no structured education readily available, young Abraham, undeterred, resourceful, and driven by an insatiable curiosity, sought out books wherever they could be found. Each borrowed volume was a treasure, a portal to worlds beyond his immediate challenging reality. He dedicated countless hours to his self-education, often in the hushed quiet of the evening, by the flickering, dancing light of a fireplace. Imagine him, his youthful face illuminated by the amber glow, tracing the intricate patterns of words with a stick of coal upon smooth, planed wooden planks, his brow furrowed in concentration, before meticulously carving these newly acquired words and concepts into the deep chambers of his memory. This was his library, his classroom, his university. His mother Nancy, a gentle yet firm presence, played an indispensable role in nurturing his moral compass. Her lessons, delivered with a quiet wisdom, were steeped in the enduring principles of honesty and an unwavering faith, values that would guide him throughout his extraordinary life. Her untimely death in 1818, a profound and heartbreaking loss, left an indelible scar upon the young boy's heart, a wound that would subtly inform his deep empathy for others in later years. However, a measure of solace and renewed warmth arrived with his father's remarriage the following year. His new stepmother, Sarah Bush Johnston Lincoln, proved to be a remarkable woman, bringing an abundance of warmth, understanding, and quiet encouragement to their home. She recognized the nascent intelligence and extraordinary potential within Abraham, referring to him with an admiring fondness as a child who read every chance he got. Her support was a crucial catalyst, nurturing his intellectual growth and providing a haven for his studies. Through the crucible of discipline, the profound sorrow of loss, and the unyielding demands of resilience, Abraham Lincoln's early years forged the foundational principles that would profoundly guide his leadership in the tumultuous decades to come. He learned through direct experience and quiet observation that knowledge was not merely an abstract concept, but a powerful tool, a pathway to understanding and progress. He also came to comprehend that perseverance, that steadfast refusal to yield in the face of adversity, was the only true path to achieving greatness. The young boy who once, with an almost solitary dedication, read by the flickering, uncertain light of a fireplace, was slowly but surely becoming the man whose own moral clarity and unwavering vision would illuminate a path for an entire struggling nation. The quiet growth of a mind under the most challenging circumstances truly is a wonder to behold. As Abraham Lincoln, now a lanky, thoughtful young man, entered his teenage years, the migratory rhythm of frontier life once again beckoned his family. In the year 1830 they embarked upon yet another journey, this time northward, settling in the vast, sweeping landscapes of Illinois, the wide, seemingly endless plains, and the expansive, often dramatic, open sky of this new territory became a grand and inspiring backdrop for a young man who was fiercely determined to transcend the humble, often challenging circumstances of his birth. Though the practical demands of life continued to present significant hardships, Lincoln's ambition, far from being stifled, grew ever stronger, burning with a quiet but intense flame within him. His formative years in Illinois were a testament to his industrious spirit and his unwavering commitment to hard work. He toiled diligently in a variety of demanding roles, each experience adding another layer to his understanding of the world and honing his practical skills. He worked as a farm hand, lending his considerable strength to the planting and harvesting of crops. He became adept as a rail splitter, the rhythmic swing of the axe against wood, a constant companion, shaping the very infrastructure of the developing frontier. He served as a store clerk, an experience that honed his understanding of commerce and human interaction, teaching him the value of honest transactions and attentive service. Later, he took on the precise and demanding work of a surveyor, meticulously measuring and mapping the vast, newly settled lands. In every task he undertook, no matter how physically demanding or seemingly mundane, he absorbed invaluable lessons in persistence, the quiet, steady effort required to see a task through, and the paramount importance of honesty, a virtue he held in the highest regard. These experiences were the bedrock upon which his character was built. Driven by an insatiable hunger to learn and to expand his intellectual horizons, Lincoln pursued his education with a singular focus and remarkable self-discipline. He borrowed law books from any local attorneys willing to lend them, often carrying them great distances, their weight a tangible representation of his ambition. He then spent countless solitary evenings, deep into the night, poring over these dense legal texts. He had no formal mentor, no established academic institution to guide him. His only compass was his profound hunger for knowledge and an unwavering, almost audacious, belief that he possessed the innate capacity to shape his own destiny through the sheer force of self-education. It was a remarkable feat of intellectual tenacity. By the time he reached the age of 28, a relatively young age for such an accomplishment, Abraham Lincoln had successfully passed the rigorous Illinois bar exam. This achievement marked a significant turning point, allowing him to formally enter the legal profession. He quickly earned a sterling reputation as a capable and eminently fair-minded lawyer within the bustling legal community of Springfield. His innate sense of justice, a quality that had been nurtured since childhood, combined with a deep, intuitive empathy for the struggles of others, made him stand out among his peers. Lincoln frequently took on cases representing the poor and the marginalized, often accepting little to no financial compensation for his services, believing that justice should not be a commodity limited by one's economic standing. His extraordinary ability to listen with profound care, to process complex information with crystalline clarity, and to articulate his thoughts and arguments with persuasive eloquence soon began to attract the attention of both the general public and influential local leaders. In 1834, just a few years after arriving in Illinois, Abraham Lincoln was elected to the Illinois state legislature, representing the Whig Party. Though he was relatively new to the intricate dance of politics, his inherent sincerity, his straightforward, plain-spoken wisdom, and his evident moral compass quickly earned him the deep respect of his colleagues and constituents alike. What had begun as the solitary journey of a self-taught lawyer, painstakingly carving out his path by the light of a flickering fire, was, with a quiet inevitability, transforming into the ascendance of a nascent leader. He was a man whose carefully chosen words, imbued with a growing gravitas, would soon begin to carry the immense weight of a nation's most profound hopes and its deepest, most fervent dreams. The stage was being set, slowly and deliberately, for a larger role than anyone could have then imagined. By the early 1840s, the reputation of Abraham Lincoln, both as a skilled and ethical lawyer and as a thoughtful legislator, had steadily grown, opening doors to the social and intellectual circles of Springfield's most prominent families. It was within these elegant settings that he first encountered Mary Todd, a woman of remarkable intellect and considerable social standing. Mary hailed from Lexington, Kentucky, a background that brought with it a different set of experiences than Lincoln's humble frontier upbringing. She was known not only for her refined education, but also for her captivating charm, her lively wit, and notably, her strong and keenly articulated political opinions. Their connection, from the very beginning, was immediate and undeniably potent, a magnetic pull between two brilliant minds. Yet it was also a relationship of inherent complexity, often tested by the very differences in their temperaments and their contrasting life experiences. Despite these challenges, which occasionally led to periods of uncertainty and even a brief, tumultuous break in their engagement, Abraham and Mary were ultimately drawn back to each other. They married on the 4th day of November, in the quiet autumn of 1842, in the dignified setting of her sister's home in Springfield, Illinois. Their union, as is often the case with deep and meaningful partnerships, was a tapestry woven with threads of both profound love and persistent challenge. It was a remarkable partnership, characterized by an enduring devotion, spirited intellectual debates, and a powerful shared ambition that propelled them both forward. Mary, with an almost prescient insight, believed deeply in her husband's extraordinary potential. She would often confide in friends, long before the wider nation recognized his genius, that he was unequivocally destined for greatness. Her faith in him was a constant source of encouragement and validation. Together, Abraham and Mary were blessed with 4 sons: Robert, Edward, William, and Thomas, who was affectionately known to all as Tad. Family life for the Lincolns, like the lives of many, was a rich blend of joyous laughter and profound sorrow, experienced in nearly equal measure. The tragic deaths of 2 of their young sons, Edward, who passed away in early childhood, and Willie, who succumbed to illness during his father's presidency, would later cast a long, enduring shadow over their hearts. These devastating losses, deeply felt and mourned, served to deepen Abraham's already profound empathy for all who suffered, for all who experienced the crushing weight of loss. It etched a quiet understanding onto his soul. Despite these immense personal hardships and the often turbulent nature of their domestic life, Mary's unwavering encouragement, coupled with Abraham's deep-seated calm and steadfast resolve, helped to forge a home grounded in an abiding faith and an unshakable perseverance. Their relationship, at once tender in its affections and turbulent in its dynamics, revealed a crucial facet of Lincoln's profound humanity. He was a man capable of experiencing the deepest, most complex emotions, a man bound by love and irrevocably strengthened by the numerous trials and tribulations that would, in their own quiet way, prepare him for the immense weight of leadership that was yet to descend upon him. The quiet crucible of his family life was in essence preparing him for the crucible of a nation. By the middle of the 1840s, Abraham Lincoln's quiet ambition had begun to grow, extending its reach beyond the familiar borders of Illinois. His years spent diligently serving in the state legislature had not only sharpened his political insight, but had also solidified his burgeoning reputation as an honest, principled, and deeply thoughtful man. These qualities, combined with his natural eloquence and integrity, made him an increasingly respected figure among his peers, both within the legal and political communities. It was in 1846 that he achieved his first significant national success, a moment of quiet triumph for a man of his background. He was elected to represent his district in the United States House of Representatives. For a man who had once, Lincoln's unwavering loyalty to the principles of fairness and reason, his commitment to engaging in thoughtful debate rather than inflammatory rhetoric, reflected a steadily growing belief within him that public service, at its core, must always be guided by a clear conscience rather than by mere political convenience or opportunistic calculations. After serving a single term, Lincoln made the deliberate choice not to seek re-election. Instead, he returned to his flourishing law practice in Springfield, Illinois, seemingly stepping back from the national political stage. Though his political career appeared to be in a temporary pause, a period of quiet reflection and dedicated legal work, his reputation, far from diminishing, continued to expand and deepen. As the contentious and increasingly divisive debate over the institution of slavery intensified across the nation, threatening to unravel the very fabric of the Union, Lincoln's views, which were deeply rooted in the fundamental ideals of equality and human dignity, began to crystallize with remarkable clarity. These views found expression not only within the quiet confines of the courtroom, where he often defended the rights of the vulnerable, but also, and more significantly, on the broader political stage, where he engaged in thoughtful discourse with growing conviction. Lincoln's extraordinary gift for language, his ability to craft words with both precision and power, became his most potent tool. His spoken words were characterized by a steady, unwavering cadence, imbued with a profound logic, and possessed a compelling persuasiveness. He had an unparalleled talent for distilling complex ideas and intricate moral dilemmas into simple, universally accessible truths that resonated deeply with ordinary people. Unbeknownst to many, including perhaps Lincoln himself, the stage was quietly, meticulously being set for a far greater battle, one that would soon come to define not only the very trajectory of his own remarkable life, but also, and irrevocably, the enduring fate of the United States. The quiet preparation was nearing its end, and the tumultuous drama was about to begin. The year was 1860, a year etched with an almost palpable tension in the heart of the burgeoning United States. The nation stood precariously on the very edge of division, its fragile unity threatened by the deeply polarizing question of slavery and the profound uncertainty surrounding the future of the Union itself. Against this turbulent and increasingly volatile backdrop, a voice of quiet wisdom and unwavering moral clarity began, almost organically, to capture the attention of a nation searching for guidance. That voice belonged to Abraham Lincoln. Having gained significant recognition and respect during the widely publicized Lincoln-Douglas debates of 1858, a series of eloquent public discussions that crisscrossed the state of Illinois, Lincoln had steadily emerged as a compelling voice of reason. He spoke with a rare sincerity, addressing not just one faction or another, but appealing directly to the collective conscience of all Americans, urging them to reflect on the foundational principles of their republic. Representing the newly formed Republican Party, a political entity born from the moral imperative to resist the expansion of slavery, Lincoln's platform was elegantly simple, yet profoundly radical for its time. It centered on the crucial need to halt the further expansion of slavery into new territories, while simultaneously, and with equal fervor, dedicating all efforts to preserving the sacred unity of the nation. His speeches, delivered with a calm, measured strength rather than fiery rhetoric, possessed an inherent gravitas that resonated deeply with ordinary citizens from all walks of life. Farmers whose hands knew the earth, merchants who understood the pulse of the marketplace, and workers who toiled with honest labor, all of them saw in Lincoln a man who not only understood their struggles, but also articulated their quiet hopes for a just and unified future. There was an authenticity to him, a sincerity that cut through the political posturing of the era. When the momentous election day finally arrived on November 6, 1860, millions of Americans stepped forward to cast their votes in a contest that, more than any before it, starkly reflected the deep and painful fractures within the nation's soul. Lincoln ultimately won the presidency, securing strong and widespread support across the northern states. However, his victory was achieved with very little backing, indeed almost no electoral votes, from the southern states. His election therefore became a powerful symbol. For some it represented a tangible promise of change, a decisive moral stand against the entrenched institution of slavery, and a resolute call for justice and unity within the Union. For others, particularly in the South, his victory was perceived as a direct threat, a declaration of intent that ignited feelings of anger and defiance, fueling their fears and their determination to separate. As the election results slowly spread across the vast expanse of the country, celebrations erupted with exuberant joy in the North, while a simmering, volatile anger flared with equal intensity throughout the South. For countless individuals, particularly those yearning for an end to human bondage, Lincoln's election marked a new dawn of hope. a tangible sign that the nation was perhaps finally moving towards its higher ideals. For many others, however, especially those whose way of life was inextricably linked to the institution of slavery, his election was a clear signal of defiance, a perceived affront that pushed them further toward the brink of secession. But for Abraham Lincoln himself, standing on the cusp of this monumental responsibility, it was not a moment for unbridled joy, but a solemn and profoundly weighty beginning. He understood with a clarity born of deep reflection the immense burden that came with this victory, a presidency that would very soon be tested, challenged, and ultimately defined by the ravages of war, the profound bitterness of national division, and the unyielding, often crushing, weight of history itself. The quiet man from Illinois was now poised to lead a nation into its most challenging crucible. When Abraham Lincoln finally took the oath of office in March of 1861, stepping into the highest leadership role in the land, the country he had so earnestly vowed to lead was already in the agonizing process of breaking apart. The delicate bonds of union were fraying, and indeed in many places they had already snapped. Several southern states, driven by a deep-seated fear for their way of life and a profound disagreement over the future of slavery, had defiantly declared their secession from the United States, and the smoldering embers of rebellion were rapidly spreading, threatening to engulf the entire nation in a conflagration. The immense, almost unbearable burden of holding the Union together, of preventing its complete fragmentation, now rested squarely and heavily upon his broad, yet still relatively untried, shoulders. Lincoln, characterized by his profound calm, his deliberate decision-making process, and his deeply reflective nature, faced each new day with the heavy, often solitary knowledge that every single decision he made, every word he uttered, every action he took, possessed the power to shape the very survival of the nation. His leadership was a beacon of quiet steadfastness in a time of overwhelming uncertainty and chaos. His first truly great test, a moment that would irrevocably define the beginning of his presidency, arrived with a violent crescendo at Fort Sumter in April of 1861, when Confederate forces, emboldened by their secession, launched an attack on a Union garrison stationed within the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina. It marked the unmistakable beginning of the American Civil War, a conflict that would tear families and communities apart and forever change the course of the nation. Lincoln's response to this direct act of aggression was not one of immediate vengeance or impulsive anger, but rather one of clear-eyed, resolute determination. He understood the gravity of the moment. He swiftly called for 75,000 volunteers to rally and defend the Union, a decisive action that, with an almost unstoppable momentum, set in motion a conflict that would tragically become one of the bloodiest and most devastating in all of human history. Throughout the arduous and prolonged duration of the war, Lincoln skillfully balanced a multitude of conflicting pressures, each demanding his attention and testing his resolve. He faced relentless critics who doubted his capabilities and openly questioned his judgment, even from within his own party. He contended with headstrong generals who sometimes defied his orders or challenged his strategic vision, and he navigated the treacherous waters of a deeply divided public, whose patience often wore thin under the weight of mounting casualties and economic hardship. Yet, despite these ceaseless challenges and the immense personal toll they extracted, he remained remarkably steadfast in his overarching purpose to preserve the Union at all costs, and to ultimately bring an end to the spread of slavery, an institution he viewed as a moral blight upon the nation. His extraordinary ability to lead not through authoritarian command, but through a profound sense of empathy, a deep understanding of human suffering, and an almost limitless patience, gradually earned him the respect, and sometimes even the grudging admiration, of those who had initially opposed him, and indeed even from some of his enemies. Lincoln frequently took the time to visit wounded soldiers in crowded hospitals, offering words of comfort and quiet encouragement. He painstakingly penned letters to grieving families, sharing in their profound sorrow, and offering solace in their darkest hours, truly understanding that this devastating war was not merely about territorial disputes or abstract political ideologies. It was, at its very core, a visceral, agonizing struggle for the very soul of America, a battle for the nation's moral identity and its future trajectory. In the darkest days of battle, when hope seemed a distant memory, he carried that hope not only as his protective shield against despair, but also as his heaviest, most sacred burden, a flickering flame he refused to let extinguish. As the brutal and unrelenting American Civil War continued to rage across the ravaged landscapes of the nation, claiming countless lives and laying waste to entire regions, Abraham Lincoln's profound vision of freedom, initially a nascent and complex idea, began to coalesce and take on a clearer, more defined shape. By the year 1862, a pivotal point in the conflict, Lincoln had come to a crucial and transformative realization. The war was no longer simply about the preservation of the Union, as it had once existed, but had evolved into a deeper, more fundamental struggle. It was, in essence, about redefining the very moral foundation of the nation, rectifying a profound and deeply ingrained historical wrong. The vexing question of slavery, an issue that had been skillfully and often cynically avoided by generations of politicians, had, under the immense pressures of war, finally become impossible to ignore, demanding a decisive and morally courageous response. Lincoln, with his characteristic foresight and moral clarity, had long held the conviction that the Union, founded on principles of liberty, could not long endure as a house divided, half slave and half free. He knew with a certainty that transcended mere political calculation, that bold, transformative action was urgently needed to bring the nation closer to its stated ideals. After months of careful, agonizing consideration, weighing the profound moral imperatives against the immense strategic and political complexities, and patiently waiting for a significant Union victory on the battlefield to strengthen his position and lend legitimacy to such a monumental declaration, Lincoln finally announced his intention to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. This historic decree was first revealed on September 22, 1862, with the understanding that it would officially come into effect on January 1, 1863. The proclamation unequivocally declared that all enslaved people residing in those territories held by the Confederate States, then in rebellion against the Union, would, as of that date, be recognized and legally considered free. This single, courageous act fundamentally transformed the character of the war itself, elevating it beyond a mere conflict over states' rights or territorial integrity into a profound moral crusade, a righteous fight not simply for political unity but, more importantly, for the fundamental human liberty and dignity of millions. The Emancipation Proclamation, a beacon of hope for the oppressed, had an immediate and far-reaching impact. It inspired countless enslaved people with renewed courage and determination to seek their freedom, often escaping to Union lines, thereby disrupting the Confederate economy and weakening their war effort. Furthermore, it opened the doors for African American men to join the Union Army and Navy, allowing them to fight for their own liberation and the preservation of the Union, thus significantly strengthening the Northern cause with an infusion of fresh, highly motivated troops. Lincoln's visionary leadership extended beyond military strategy and moral declarations. It also spurred significant reforms in various other sectors of American life. He signed into law the Homestead Act, a landmark piece of legislation that opened vast tracts of western lands to settlers, promising them an opportunity for a new life and contributing to the nation's westward expansion. He also approved the Morrill Act, another transformative initiative that led to the establishment of agricultural and technical colleges across the nation, laying the groundwork for widespread public higher education and scientific advancement. Though his actions were met with fierce criticism from some quarters, particularly from those who opposed emancipation or felt he had overstepped his presidential authority, and were simultaneously lauded as heroic by others, Lincoln stood firm, unwavering in his convictions. His steadfast belief in the supremacy of justice over mere political expediency or partisan interests profoundly reshaped the nation's ideals, guiding it toward a more inclusive and equitable future. In the momentous act of freeing others, of daring to champion the cause of human liberty on such a grand scale, Abraham Lincoln undeniably brought the United States significantly closer to fulfilling its foundational and most sacred promise, the enduring truth that all people are created equal, endowed with inherent and inalienable rights. This was not merely a political maneuver, but a profound moral awakening, a step toward a more perfect union. Even as Abraham Lincoln, with an almost superhuman resolve, labored tirelessly to preserve the Union and steadfastly worked towards the abolition of slavery, his extraordinary leadership was met with an unceasing torrent of resistance from various quarters. The years spanning 1863 and 1864 were, without question, among the most arduous and emotionally draining of his entire presidency. The Civil War, a brutal and seemingly interminable conflict, had dragged on far longer than anyone had initially anticipated, or indeed could have possibly imagined. The casualty counts, reported with grim regularity, were staggering, each number representing a profound human tragedy, and public confidence in the war effort, and in Lincoln's ability to lead, was visibly fading across both the Union and the Confederacy. A pall of weariness settled over the nation, and many, consumed by doubt and despair, openly questioned whether the Union could possibly survive such a protracted and bloody struggle, and whether Lincoln himself possessed the necessary fortitude and wisdom to ultimately save it. In the northern states, where the burden of war was keenly felt, critics mounted a barrage of accusations against him, charging him with abusing his executive power through controversial wartime measures. Among the most contentious of these was his decision to suspend the writ of habeas corpus, a fundamental legal protection which allowed for the arrest and detention of suspected Confederate sympathizers without immediate trial. Political opponents with venomous rhetoric gleefully labeled him a dictator, portraying him as a despot trampling upon constitutional liberties. Meanwhile, a vocal faction of peace advocates, derisively known as Copperheads, vehemently demanded immediate negotiations with the South, advocating for an end to the conflict at almost any cost, even if it meant a compromise on the fundamental issue of slavery. Even some of his own generals, highly positioned and influential, harbored profound doubts about his military judgment, leading to frequent and often bitter clashes over strategic decisions and the overall command structure of the Union forces. Beyond the relentless pressures of public office and the immense responsibilities of wartime leadership, personal sorrow weighed with an almost unbearable heaviness upon Lincoln's already burdened soul. The devastating death of his beloved young son Willie in 1862 had inflicted a wound that never truly healed, a profound grief that deepened the inherent sense of isolation that inevitably accompanied his singular position of leadership. Yet, through this confluence of grief, turmoil, and relentless criticism, Lincoln's remarkable resolve never once wavered. His inner compass remained steadfastly fixed on his ultimate goals. He often resorted to his innate sense of humor and his profound humility to cope with the incessant barrage of criticism, famously remarking, with a wry, self-effacing wit, "If I were to try to read, much less answer, all the attacks made on me, this shop might as well be closed for any other business." This simple statement revealed his pragmatic approach to leadership and his refusal to be distracted by personal attacks. His extraordinary patience, his deep well of wisdom, and his unwavering moral courage served as his anchors, helping him to endure storms that might well have utterly broken lesser men. Through every trial, every personal sorrow, every political attack, he remained immovably anchored to his singular, overarching purpose: to heal a fractured nation, to bind up its wounds, and to ensure that the grand experiment of American democracy, conceived in liberty, would not perish from the earth. His quiet strength was a testament to his profound character. By the vibrant spring of 1865, a season of renewal and burgeoning hope, the long and exceptionally bitter Civil War was at last perceptibly drawing to a close. The Union armies, under the resolute and brilliant command of General Ulysses S. Grant, had achieved a series of steady, decisive victories across the ravaged landscapes of the South. Abraham Lincoln, though visibly weary from the immense burden of years of conflict, felt a burgeoning sense of hope. He began with a cautious optimism to truly envision the possibility of a lasting peace, a cessation of hostilities after 4 grueling years of relentless, agonizing bloodshed and profound national sacrifice. Yet, even in the midst of this approaching triumph, he carried within him the deep, pervasive sorrow of a leader who had intimately witnessed the immense and often unimaginable human cost of securing that hard-won freedom. A profoundly symbolic moment arrived on April 3rd, when Richmond, the once proud capital of the Confederate States, finally fell to Union forces. Lincoln, with characteristic humility and a desire to witness the historic shift firsthand, chose to visit the city in person, accompanied by only a small escort. As he walked through its war-torn streets, his tall, familiar figure drawing immediate attention, he was surrounded by throngs of newly freed men and women. In a profoundly moving display of raw emotion and heartfelt gratitude, many of them spontaneously knelt before him, reverently expressing their thanks to the man who had, through his resolute will, become synonymous with their liberation. Lincoln, visibly moved to tears by their profound humility and outpouring of emotion, gently urged them to rise, his voice soft yet firm. He spoke words that resonated with his inherent humility and deep moral conviction. "Do not kneel to me. That is not right. You must kneel only to God and thank Him for your freedom." It was a moment that perfectly encapsulated both his profound humility and the immense moral victory that he had fought so tirelessly and sacrificed so much to achieve. Just 6 days later, on April 9th, a date forever etched in American history, General Robert E. Lee, the revered commander of the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia, formally surrendered. As the devastating war finally neared its arduous conclusion, with the promise of peace flickering on the horizon, it became tragically clear that not everyone within the divided nation welcomed Abraham Lincoln's magnanimous vision of reconciliation and unity. In the shadowy corners and dimly lit parlors of Washington, D.C., a deeply embittered and fervently pro-Confederate actor named John Wilkes Booth began to meticulously weave a dark and sinister plot against the very president he vehemently despised. Viewing Lincoln as nothing less than a tyrannical usurper, Booth, a charismatic figure who had once commanded the admiration of audiences upon the theatrical stage, had, through the corrosive influence of radicalized ideology, transformed into a passionate and unyielding Confederate sympathizer. In his twisted perception, Lincoln's ultimate success, the triumph of the Union, signified nothing less than the utter death and complete subjugation of the cherished Southern cause, and he, consumed by a burning, vengeful rage, was absolutely determined to strike back, to make a violent, unforgettable statement. In the waning months of 1864, as the Confederacy began its final, agonizing collapse, Booth, with a chilling deliberation, conceived and, with several carefully chosen associates, began to devise an elaborate and audacious plan. Their initial goal was to kidnap President Lincoln. Their twisted objective was to use the president as an invaluable bargaining chip, a powerful leverage that would, they hoped, force the Union government to release a large number of Confederate prisoners of war, thereby reinvigorating the Southern fighting effort. Booth diligently recruited a small, desperate group of conspirators for this dangerous undertaking. This clandestine group included Lewis Powell, a powerful and imposing figure; David Herold, a young man skilled in woodcraft and evasion; George Atzerodt, a timid but desperate German immigrant; Samuel Arnold, an old-school friend of Booth's; and John Surratt, a Confederate courier with deep connections to espionage networks. Their secret meetings were often held in the bustling yet discreet boarding house owned by Mary Surratt, a widow whose son John played a significant role in connecting the conspirators to the clandestine Confederate spy network. On March 17, 1865, Booth believed he had his opportune moment. He meticulously planned to capture Lincoln as the president traveled to visit a military hospital located near Washington. However, by a stroke of pure, devastating chance, Lincoln, at the very last moment, unexpectedly changed his plans for the day, choosing instead to attend an unannounced ceremony. The meticulously laid opportunity, so close to fruition, slipped away, leaving Booth profoundly frustrated, his desperation simmering beneath the surface. With the Confederacy rapidly collapsing, its armies facing certain defeat, and General Lee's ultimate surrender only a matter of weeks away, Booth's initial scheme, born of a twisted patriotism, began to morph, darkening into something far more deadly and sinister. The failed kidnapping plan, instead of deterring him, tragically gave birth to an even more horrific and radicalized objective, a conspiracy no longer merely to capture Lincoln, but with cold-blooded intent to brutally end his life. The stage, unseen by the unsuspecting public, was being meticulously set for a tragedy that would not only shock the nation, but would forever echo through the somber corridors of American history. The quiet, insidious machinations of hatred were moving toward their terrible culmination. By the early days of April in the momentous year 1865, John Wilkes Booth's simmering anger, fueled by a potent cocktail of Confederate loyalty, personal ambition, and a twisted sense of grievance, had hardened into an unshakable, consuming obsession. The Confederacy, the cause he had so passionately championed, was unequivocally defeated. Its armies were shattered, its capital had fallen, and his grandiose dream of an independent Southern nation was now irrevocably gone, dissolved into the bitter dust of war. Yet, in the labyrinthine corridors of his own mind, a final, desperate act of violence, a dramatic and shocking blow, could, he believed, still avenge the profound humiliation and loss suffered by the South, and perhaps, crucially, restore his own tarnished sense of glory and significance. No longer content with the original, less drastic plan of kidnapping, Booth's resolve had solidified into a grim determination. He would assassinate Abraham Lincoln, not in a moment of impulsive rage, but with a calculated coldness, along with other key members of the Union government, in a desperate bid to plunge the nation into chaos. Booth, now fully committed to his heinous scheme, gathered his carefully chosen conspirators once more at Mary Surratt's unassuming boarding house in Washington, D.C. It was within these very walls, under a cloak of secrecy, that the final, chilling details of the assassination plot were meticulously hammered out. Each participant assigned a specific, horrific role. Lewis Powell, a man of immense physical strength and brutal resolve, was tasked with the violent assault on Secretary of State William Seward, who was recovering from a carriage accident. George Atzerodt, the most reluctant and nervous of the group, was assigned the grim duty of targeting Vice President Andrew Johnson, expected to be at his hotel, and Booth himself, driven by a perverse sense of destiny and a hunger for a dramatic theatrical exit, would undertake the ultimate act, striking down the president, Abraham Lincoln. The coordinated assaults, timed for simultaneous execution, were intended to throw the fragile Union government into utter disarray and profound chaos, thereby creating, in Booth's deluded mind, a desperate opportunity for the defeated South to somehow rise again, to reignite the flames of rebellion from the ashes of defeat. On the morning of April 14th, a day that would forever be etched in infamy, Booth received the intelligence he had been so impatiently awaiting. President Lincoln, seeking a moment of respite and diversion after the long, grueling years of war, would be attending a performance of the popular comedy, Our American Cousin, at Ford's Theater that very evening. It was, for Booth, the perfect confluence of opportunity and timing. He knew Ford's Theater intimately, having performed there on countless occasions, and was intimately familiar with its intricate layout, its hidden passages, and its various vantage points. The afternoon was spent in a grim flurry of preparations. He carefully arranged for a fast, reliable horse to be waiting for his escape, meticulously prepared his single-shot Derringer pistol and his personal dagger, ensuring they were ready for their terrible purpose, and even visited the theater under the guise of an actor to make final, subtle preparations within the presidential box itself. As the gentle twilight began to descend, painting the sky with the soft hues of evening, the conspirators departed, each heading their separate ways, their minds consumed by the grim mission that lay ahead. Booth, dressed entirely in black, a somber figure cloaked in the approaching darkness, confided a chilling whisper to a friend, a dramatic pronouncement that would soon take on a terrifyingly prophetic resonance. Something extraordinary will happen tonight. He appeared outwardly calm, almost unnervingly confident, yet he was utterly consumed by a virulent, all-encompassing hatred, a darkness that blinded him to the true gravity of his impending actions. He remained blissfully unaware, in his twisted fervor, that his name was about to become, for all time, irrevocably linked with one of the darkest, most profoundly sorrowful nights in the entire sweep of American history. The quiet prelude to an unthinkable act was almost complete. It was the evening of April 14th, 1865, a night that began with an air of celebratory lightness, a profound sense of relief that peace, after 4 long, bloody years, had finally arrived. Ford's Theater, nestled on 10th Street, in the heart of Washington, D.C., was abuzz with a palpable atmosphere of laughter, animated conversation, and joyous excitement. Hundreds of citizens, eager to momentarily escape the lingering anxieties of the war, had gathered within its ornate walls to enjoy a performance of the popular comedy, Our American Cousin. Among the distinguished guests, occupying the plush comfort of the presidential box, was President Abraham Lincoln himself, accompanied by his beloved wife Mary and their esteemed guests, Major Henry Rathbone and his fiancée, Clara Harris. The mood surrounding the president was uncharacteristically light-hearted. Lincoln, known for his often melancholy disposition, had by many accounts smiled more that day than anyone had seen him do in months, perhaps years. He genuinely believed that the nation was finally poised on the precipice of enduring peace, a hard-won tranquility after a period of unimaginable national torment. Unseen, a shadow moving silently among the jubilant crowd, John Wilkes Booth, dressed neatly and blending seamlessly with the general audience, moved through the theater with a chilling, singular purpose. He knew the building intimately, every whisper of its history, every hidden passage. Around 10:15 that fateful night, as the play reached one of its most uproarious moments, a scene designed to elicit a surge of loud, uninhibited laughter from the audience. Booth, with a chilling precision, slipped unnoticed into the narrow hallway that led directly to the presidential box. He had already earlier that day meticulously prepared the door, wedging a sturdy wooden bar against it, to ensure that no one could follow him in, or intervene in his ghastly mission. Just as the actor Harry Hawke delivered a particularly humorous line, "You succopising old man trap," a line perfectly timed to ignite a fresh wave of boisterous laughter from the audience, the sharp, deafening crack of Booth's single-shot Derringer pistol pierced the air. The sound, muffled by the joyous cacophony, went largely unnoticed by most. The bullet, fired at close range, struck President Lincoln in the back of the head, just behind his left ear. Mary Lincoln's subsequent piercing scream, a sound of unimaginable terror and grief, shattered the festive atmosphere, instantly plunging the theater into utter chaos. In the immediate aftermath of the shot, Booth, with a dramatic flourish born of his theatrical training, leapt from the presidential box to the stage below. In his haste, however, his spur tragically caught on the festive, decorative flag draped over the box, causing him to fall awkwardly and breaking his leg in the process. Despite the excruciating pain, he rose, brandishing his dagger with a desperate, defiant gesture, and shouted, with a voice raw with hatred, "Sic semper tyrannis," thus always to tyrants. He then fled into the night on a waiting horse, disappearing into the darkness, leaving behind him a stunned, bewildered nation and a dying president, collapsing irrevocably into the arms of his devoted wife. This horrific act marked the beginning of 12 days that would forever alter the course of America, initiating a period of profound national mourning and a frantic, desperate manhunt that captivated the world. The silence that followed the shot was heavier than any sound. The moment the solitary gunshot echoed with such chilling finality through the vibrant expanse of Ford's Theater, a wave of profound panic, sudden and disorienting, swept across the unsuspecting audience. The initial laughter and applause swiftly dissolved into screams of terror and confusion. Mary Lincoln's heart-wrenching cries, raw with anguish, pierced the chaotic air, a sound that would haunt those present for years to come. Instantly, amidst the swirling confusion, soldiers, members of the audience, and several doctors, recognizing the gravity of the situation, rushed desperately toward the presidential box. Charles Leal, a young army surgeon who happened to be attending the play, was the first to reach the gravely wounded president. He found Lincoln slumped forward, unconscious, but still, remarkably, drawing shallow, labored breaths. With a doctor's grim assessment, Leal immediately understood the devastating truth. The wound was irrevocably fatal. Recognizing the urgent need to move the president to a more stable location, Leal and others present carefully carried the tall, heavy frame of the president across the street, through the growing crowd of horrified onlookers, to a modest dwelling known as the Peterson House. There, with gentle hands, they laid him on a small, unassuming bed, one that could barely contain his imposing height, his long limbs extending beyond its frame. Throughout the long, agonizing night, as the hours crept by with torturous slowness, the small room became a somber vigil. Government officials, esteemed doctors, and grieving family members gathered in hushed silence, their faces etched with sorrow and disbelief, their collective hope dwindling with each passing moment. Lincoln's breathing remained shallow and irregular, a testament to his fading life force. His beloved wife, Mary, inconsolable in her grief and overcome by the magnitude of the tragedy, was gently led away, her heart shattered by the unimaginable loss. Meanwhile, Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, a man of immense resolve and a key figure in Lincoln's administration, quickly took charge of the chaotic situation. With a steely determination, he established a makeshift command center within the Peterson House, coordinating the immediate response to the assassination. His primary objective to organize and launch the largest, most comprehensive manhunt in American history for Booth and his accomplices, ensuring that justice would be swiftly served. As the first pale rays of dawn began to touch the Washington skyline, bringing with them a new day of profound national sorrow, the president, who had guided the nation through its darkest hours, took his final gentle breath. At exactly 7:22 on the morning of April 15, 1865, Abraham Lincoln departed this world. Stanton, looking upon the still, peaceful face of the man he had served with such loyalty, uttered words that would resonate through eternity, recognizing the monumental impact of the life that had just ended. Now he belongs to the ages. The silence that followed his words was absolute, a profound stillness that marked the end of an era and the beginning of a nation's enduring grief. The journey of the great emancipator had come to its quiet, tragic close. In the immediate aftermath of that devastating night at Ford's Theater, as the nation reeled in shock and plunged into a deep collective mourning, the vast machinery of the United States government, under the stern and unwavering leadership of Secretary Stanton, turned its formidable attention to the relentless pursuit of the assassin, John Wilkes Booth, and his co-conspirators. The manhunt that ensued was, at that time, the largest in American history, a desperate and determined effort to bring to justice the men who had struck such a grievous blow to the heart of the Republic. Booth, despite his theatrically broken leg, managed to make his initial escape into the darkness, aided by his knowledge of the local terrain and a prearranged horse. He rendezvoused with David Herold, one of his accomplices, who was to guide him. Together they navigated the unfamiliar roads and trails, seeking refuge and medical attention for Booth's severely injured leg. Their desperate flight led them to the rural home of Dr. Samuel Mudd, a physician who, they hoped, could provide aid without question. Mudd, later claiming to be unaware of Booth's identity or his heinous crime, provided medical treatment for the broken bone, an act that would later embroil him in the conspiracy and lead to his imprisonment. The chase intensified with each passing hour. Thousands of Union soldiers, cavalry units, and detectives fanned out across the countryside, relentlessly tracking every lead, following every rumor, and questioning every suspect. Posters offering substantial rewards for the capture of Booth and his accomplices were widely distributed, plastering walls and public spaces across the eastern seaboard. The entire nation, gripped by a potent mix of grief and outrage, watched and waited, desperate for news, eager for justice to be meted out. Booth and Herold, though initially successful in eluding their pursuers, were becoming increasingly desperate, their hiding places more precarious, their resources dwindling. They traveled southward through Maryland, hoping to cross the Potomac River and find safety in Virginia, a land still reeling from the war, but potentially sympathetic to their cause. After nearly 12 days of relentless pursuit, a significant period of time that transformed Booth from a celebrated actor into the most reviled man in America, the net finally tightened around the fugitives. On April 26th, Union cavalry, specifically a detachment of the 16th New York Cavalry, tracked Booth and Herold to a tobacco barn on the remote Garrett Farm near Port Royal, Virginia. As the soldiers surrounded the barn demanding their surrender, Herold, terrified, chose to give himself up. Booth, however, defiantly refused, choosing instead to barricade himself inside, determined to go down fighting. The soldiers, with orders to capture him alive if possible, set fire to the barn, hoping to smoke him out. As the flames engulfed the structure, illuminating the night sky, it was in this chaotic moment that Sergeant Boston Corbett, a Union soldier who had experienced a profound religious conversion, spotted Booth through a crack in the barn wall. Acting on his own initiative, and later claiming divine guidance, Corbett fired a single shot from his Colt revolver. The bullet struck Booth in the neck, severing his spinal cord, ironically near the same spot where Lincoln had been shot. Booth collapsed, mortally wounded. He was dragged from the burning barn and laid on the porch of the Garrett farmhouse, where he lingered for several agonizing hours, paralyzed and gasping his last words, "Useless." He died shortly after sunrise, on April 26th, bringing a dramatic and violent end to the manhunt for the assassin. In the wake of Booth's death, the remaining conspirators were systematically rounded up. Apprehended by determined authorities, a military tribunal was convened to try them, reflecting the government's view that their actions constituted acts of war and treason. Mary Surratt, Lewis Powell, David Herold, and George Atzerodt were all found guilty of conspiracy and were subsequently hanged on July 7, 1865, a grim and stark testament to the gravity of their crimes and the profound sorrow that had gripped the nation. Samuel Arnold and Michael O'Laughlin, another conspirator, received life sentences, while John Surratt managed to escape to Canada and then to Europe, though he was later captured and eventually acquitted in a civilian trial. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln, a man who had guided his nation through its most perilous trial, plunged the United States into an unprecedented period of grief and uncertainty, compounding the already immense suffering of the Civil War. His passing was not merely the loss of a president, but the loss of a unifying figure, a symbol of hope and reconciliation in a deeply wounded land. His death sent shockwaves across the globe, reverberating through international capitals and touching the hearts of ordinary people who admired his steadfastness and moral courage. His legacy, however, far outshone the tragedy of his end. Lincoln's life, from his birth in a humble log cabin to his ascent to the highest office in the land, remains a powerful testament to the American ideal of opportunity, perseverance, and self-improvement. He championed the cause of unity, holding the fractured states together with his unwavering will and extraordinary leadership. He tirelessly fought for freedom, ultimately issuing the Emancipation Proclamation, which irrevocably changed the course of American history and set millions free from the shackles of slavery. And he embodied a profound sense of justice, believing in the inherent dignity and equality of all people. The enduring echo of his words, his Gettysburg Address, his second inaugural, his countless letters and speeches, continues to inspire, to challenge, and to remind us of the better angels of our nature. They speak of a nation founded on the principles of liberty and equality, a nation worth fighting for, worth preserving, and worth continually striving to perfect. He left behind a legacy